we'll say made their own colony, made their own city, whatever. And David actually and his men went to fight essentially for the Philistines for a while here. And however, once it came to, it was all smaller battles, okay? Once it came to one that would be a little bit larger, the king there was hoping to be able to, not the king, the leader, it was the prince, the son of the king, who David was, I'll say, buddies with, okay? He was the one in whose name you could say he went to battle for, that sort of thing. He was thinking, okay, I'm going to really be able to get David on my side now. He trusted David, okay? He thought, okay, we're going to go into a bigger battle, one where it then required all the surrounding Philistine cities, their armies, to pool together as one. It was going to be a bigger, greater battle. However, all the other princes and lords and, higher ups and generals, as I said last week, okay, they were just like, no, we don't care how much you trust him. This is David we're talking about. And one, in fact, it says he even brought up that little chant or song, whatever you want to call it, that all the women had praised David about before, about how the Saul had slain his thousands, David his tens thousands. No, this is the same guy that has, a lot of those tens of thousands he's slain were us. No, this is not going to happen. We will not allow it. So Achish, which was the prince's name there, who was friends with David and trusted him, told him, tomorrow morning, first light, you guys just need to leave. There's nothing between us. I trust you with my life, okay? I don't want there to be any bad blood, however, it's just, this is not a good time. This is not good. Just go home to your families. And so that's what they did. They got up and they went to head back to their home of that time, which was Ziklag. So we're going to pick it up right there in verse 1 of chapter 30. 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 1. Now it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken captive the women and those who were there, from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Excuse me, real quick, let's go ahead and take a pause right there. So here, David and his men, David has almost, I don't want to say suffered, but he has, I'm sure his countenance, okay, his just overall demeanor is probably a little bit lower than it normally is, being that, he felt he was at a good position. Doesn't mean he should have been there, but he was at a good position with this friend that he had made, okay, with this prince of one of the Philistine cities, He thought he had it good, and yet he has now been essentially kicked out. Oh, I've got some. They almost at this point almost clubbed me. Thank you though. I've gone through probably 100 in the past couple days, so thank you though. And so here he is, just coming out of that, saying, going to go home. And I'm, as what I would call a typical or average husband, okay? I'm sure as he's heading back, it's just he's trying to, how can I put it, trying to, I don't want to say puff himself up, that brings a bad connotation, trying to get his mood a little bit better, okay? Probably doesn't want to necessarily come home. We're not sure how long he's been away from his family, okay? And wants to come home in a better attitude, and starts trying to think of the positive, I'm sure. Okay, I'm going to be able to get to see my wives, I'm going to be able to see my kid, I'm going to be able to get to see my family again, okay? And then I'm sure at some point there, whether it's they come over the rise or whatever, they notice and they find out that Ziklag is no more at this point, okay? Everyone is gone, the buildings are burned down, and I'm sure from a distance at first, for everyone, I'm sure the worst thought went through their head, and that's they had lost everyone in the sense of death. And so the picture I have in my head is, they rush down, rush in. To a point, I'm sure there is the tiniest bit of relief, at least in David's eyes, okay, and at least in David's mind, and that is the sense of, well, there's no bodies, right? Yes, it's a horrible thing that has happened, but still, there's no bodies, okay? So there's no proof. For all they know, they could still be alive. And we know from the text that they are, that none of them had been killed. Oh, however, remember, David's men were not nice guys. Okay? These men were bottom of the barrel lot, okay? And so in their anger and everything, it says that the place where they went was the fact that once they got to the point where they just couldn't cry anymore. Okay, I don't know if anyone here has ever been at that point where you just cried to the point where your body just cannot produce any more tears, okay? It's like you feel like you want to cry, but you're just dry, okay? You can't make any more. By the time these men are to that point, okay, that's what it says. They had no more power to weep, okay? They're at that point. It says that because they were all grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters, everything, the people actually spoke of stoning David. They put this, not just on these men, but all of us in our lives, whenever something bad happens, okay, typically we like to always find a scapegoat, okay, someone to put the blame on. Now sometimes there's no other option but to be able to, I can say this to myself many times, oh gosh, Nate, you are so stupid. When it happens, it's just like, sometimes it's more major things. Other times, unfortunately, this is proof that I do not learn from my mistakes. More often than not, I can distinctly remember, say at work, something, me going and saying, thinking it originally, okay, when I go to do something, okay, now watch, I am going to forget this or, whatever. I say, no, I'll be good. And then, no, sure enough, and I specifically, once, it happens or I find the thing I lost or whatever, when I get the issue resolved, I remember back and say, oh, you know what? I even said that would happen, and the other. Anyways, I don't even know where I was going with that. Sorry, little rabbit trail. Got off on a rant there. So anyways, looking for a scapegoat. These men were looking for a scapegoat, somebody to blame this on, and so they started blaming it on David, okay? However, one thing with David is that we are not told anyways, that he did anything as far as trying to defend himself to the people, trying to defend himself to the men. We don't see him running. He goes to God, It says in the end of verse 6 where we ended, but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Verse 7, then David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, please bring the ephod here to me. And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? I'm going to stop right there and just point something out. When it comes to, at this point, David being reliant on God, okay, and God's permission or input, however you want to put it here, that must have taken a lot for him. As a husband, okay, at this point, and it's just, I know that I would want to just immediately, I don't even know, to be honest, if I was in David's place, if I would have even considered asking God's permission, I would have wanted just gone right after those people, But David didn't. He paused, and he asked God's permission, I'll put it that way. And sure enough, God answered him in the middle of verse 8 where we left off there. And he answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. Imagine the relief when God gave David that answer. David knew right away that, sure enough, everyone and everything that had been taken, okay, everyone was still alive. Or else God would not have said that you would recover all. Okay? So David went, verse 9, he and his 600 men who were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those stayed who were left behind. But David pursued, he and 400 men. For 200 stayed behind, who were so weary they could not cross the brook Besor. So the 200 that stayed behind, it could have been anything from men who were starting to get up there in years. They still knew how to fight. They still had that fighting spirit in them. But after all those little battles, the travel home, and then, weeping to the point of not being able to weep anymore, that takes a toll on your body as well, okay? So, whether it be that sort of situation, or, maybe there were some who were injured at that point, who just were not able to go into battle again. 200 total. 200 of the 600 stayed behind, okay? 400 continued on with David as they went on. Verse 11, they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David. They gave him bread and he ate, and they let him drink water. They gave him a piece of a cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. So when he had eaten, his strength came back to him, for he had eaten no bread nor drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him, to whom do you belong, and where are you from? And he said, I am a young man from Egypt, servant of an Amalekite. And my master left me behind because 3 days ago I fell sick. We made an invasion of the southern area of the Cherethites and the territory which belongs to Judah and the southern area of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. I'm going to say that this young man probably had no idea who David and his men were. Excuse me. All he knows is that he had been his own, he was a servant, but still, you could say his own people left him behind 3 days before because he was sick in some way, okay? And yet David and his men found him, picked him up, brought him in, fed him, and gave him water to drink till he just couldn't anymore, and so here he is, and just saying, he's just telling who he is and what he's been doing, what he's been to a point a part of. And David said to him, can you take me down to this troop? Okay, so he said, now this is the servant, swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this troop. Okay? So at this point, this young man, this Egyptian man, this servant, it has occurred to him after David's question who it was he was speaking to, who these people were. And so he's just like, well, there's three choices here, essentially, okay? I know if I go back to my master, I will be essentially punished for the rest of my life, okay? It's not going to be good. My tasks are going to be worse. There'll be less food given to me, less water given to me, but more work required of me, this sort of thing, okay? However, this is David and his men. We just burned down their city, took their whole family, so they could very easily kill me. What's my third option? See if I can make a deal with David. So obviously, he went with that. And he asked him, he said, swear to me by God. Okay, so he knew, he must have known, okay, about David. Not just his conquests, okay, in the Philistine world, but he must have known David as well when it came to David's faith. And he says, swear to me that you will never kill me, neither kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master. And yes, I'll take you right to him. Okay, here are these people that had gone and just fed him, gave him water to drink when his own people wouldn't. He figured, well, if I can get out of this, at least I got a meal. At least I got some, at least I'm still alive, and I'm, maybe he's even thinking about being able to try and travel back to his homeland of Egypt, okay? We don't know this, but...
I think David heard the old saying, you get more flies with sugar or honey than you do vinegar.
Oh, exactly, yes. Oh, I'm sure. But I mean, at this point, I'm sure this man's life, to a point, you could say, did it matter to him in the grand scheme of things? As in, he knew from God, because of what God had told him, that his wives, his family was still alive, okay? So that's what he was focused on. He couldn't care less, really, about this man, because he also knew the man's position, okay? So he wasn't a general in the army or anything like that, okay? He was a servant. He would have been, if he was one of the warriors, it was because he was forced to fight. He did not have a choice in it. It was either fight for me or you die. So that's the situation he would have been in. Verse 16, and when he had brought him down, there they were, spread out over all the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil which they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. Then David attacked them from twilight until the evening of the next day. Not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives. And nothing of theirs was lacking, either great or small, sons or daughters, spoil or anything which they had taken from them. David recovered all. Then David took all the flocks and herds they had driven before those other livestock and said, this is David's spoil. Now David came to the 200 men who had been so weary that they could not follow David, whom they had also had made to stay at the brook Besor. So they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near the people, he greeted them. Okay, so sure enough, this Egyptian servant takes them, says, there you go, right there. Have at them. We don't know anything else. We don't know if it was okay. There they are. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the food. And if he took off, or if he stayed and to be a part of the David's band, we don't know. That's not given to us. Obviously, it wasn't important when it came to the grand scheme of things here. So they go down, and sure enough, just as God had said, David recovered everything, okay? They were able to recover absolutely everything. It said even great or small. Every single item, every single body, I'll call it, of livestock, every single wife, every single child, everyone and everything had been, they were able to recover. As well as they ended up with their own spoil. So all the other stuff that the Amalekites had gotten from other cities and stuff that they had overtaken, David then took possession of that as his spoil. So here they have come back and they have reunited with those 200. Those 200 that were just too tired, they were not physically able to go with them for this, met back up with them. And David went forward and said to greet them. Now I'm just going to give you over the next several verses here, I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of exactly what happened. So all the David's men, so the 400 other men that David had with him, came to David because David was thinking about, I want to still, because customary was when you went in, when you went and conquered, is that the spoils will be divided evenly among I'll call it among the army, among the soldiers. David wanted to give those 200 a portion, okay? An equal, fair, and share portion. Because it wasn't that these people were lazy, okay? They were just not physically able to go. However, it says that the wicked and worthless men, that's what the New King James says, the wicked and worthless men, those that went with David, said that because they didn't go, they shouldn't get anything at all. But David said, I'm going to read it in verse 23, my brethren, you shall not do so with what the Lord has given us, who has preserved us and delivered into our hand the truth that came against us. David's saying this was nothing to do with us. This was not just our doing. This was not because of our might. This was not because of us that we were able to conquer. It's not because of us that we got all our stuff back plus extra. This was given of God. Because it was given of God, we are not going to, I'll use the term, hoard it to ourselves. Okay? These other men deserve their fair share. So he actually, from that, David actually made it from that day forward. It was an official rule, not just an unspoken rule, that they did. He made it a statute from that day forward that is the way it was to work, okay? If you were part of the military, even if you were not part of the conquering troop itself, if you were not able to fight in it, if you were still part of that military, you would still get your fair share of spoils brought in because you were because you were part of it, even though you were not there. And then it goes on to list all of the people that he gave stuff to. Excuse me. He gave it to all the different leaders, to all the different people, and everything lists there. Chapter 31 is not one that we are going to look at because we're looking at David, okay? It sounds kind of odd, okay, saying this because of the type of chapter it is. Okay, chapter 31 tells of the death of Saul and most of his sons, okay, King Saul. The reason why I encourage you to read this as well, not just of the fact, that it's in the Bible, okay? So obviously it needs to be read, it's important. But also because of the fact of remember how David had said previously that God he would not let anyone, even his men standing right beside him, kill King Saul, because God would take care of him in some way. I mean, unfortunately, so I don't know if any of you have Bibles that do this, but in certain areas, sometimes there are chapter beginnings, or sometimes in the middle, of a chapter, it'll give a little bit of a title heading of what's happening. And mine for chapter 31 says the tragic end of Saul and his sons. It really is the way it happens. It was not just you could say a death in the battlefield. There's a lot more that goes into it. That's really a lot of defamation in there of King Saul and everything. But anyways, let's move into, since we are looking at David, let's move into 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel chapter 1, you'll notice too that over these next couple chapters, that it is because of the type of study that we are doing, just looking at David, we're going to skip around a little bit, okay? So 2 Samuel chapter 1. Now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David had returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had stayed 2 days in Ziklag. On the 3rd day, behold, it happened that a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. So it was when he came to David, he fell to the ground and prostrated himself, and that means he laid flat on his face on the ground, okay? And David said to him, where have you come from? So he said to him, I have escaped from the camp of Israel. Then David said to him, how did the matter go? Please tell me. And he answered, the people have fled from the battle. Many of the people are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan his son are dead also. So David said to the young man who told him, how do you know that Saul and Jonathan his son are dead? Now, I will tell you one thing, being we did not look at chapter 31 of 1 Samuel, okay? What this guy goes into, part of it is a lie. And because he tells a lie, well, to try and make himself look great, it brings about his own demise. We will see this, okay? So verse 6, and the young man who told him said, as I happened by chance to be on Mount Gilboa, there was Saul leaning on his spear. Now that is true, okay? King Saul was in a point where he saw that no matter what, it was either he was going to die right there, or he knew that he would be essentially taken captive of and most likely tortured, okay? King Saul tried having his armor bearer kill him, for him. His armor bearer said no. So King Saul did. He leaned on his own. This is one other thing. He leaned on his sword, not on his spear. That's something there that this guy tells. The first little lie, okay, is it was actually his sword, not his spear. And indeed, beginning again in verse 6 there, and indeed, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. Now when he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me, and I answered, here I am. No, that did not happen. And he said to me, who are you? So I answered him, I am an Amalekite. He said to me again, please stand over me and kill me, for anguish has come upon me, but my life still remains in me. So I stood over him and killed him, because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. Okay? I don't know what was going on in this guy's mind. I mean, to think that, anyone might possibly believe that the king would actually ask an Amalekite to come over and kill him in that way. But anyways, it must have sounded good in his head.
I think he might have thought he was going to get brownie points from David.
That's possible too, because he may have known how that Saul's been going after David, hey, I helped you out, and that's possible.
They all knew what Saul had done
Yeah, I mean, well, Saul wasn't bashful about it. Remember, like I pointed out so many times, how much, at times it was David and 400, and then eventually it was David and 600. But you would have Saul going after them with 3,000 of his top men that he could find. I mean, it was, remember how the one picture that David had given was, oh, now I can't. It was basically bringing way too much to the table. You're acting like you're going after something, but instead you're going after a flea. That was the picture that David had given, and that was the case. So I mean, it was very well known. So that's a very good idea that he probably thought, you know what, he's going to be thankful of me for this, so he concocts this. I mean, and there is very little of his little story that he concocted that is true, okay? Other than the fact that he very well may have seen, okay, King Saul, take his own life, okay, in the war by leaning on his sword, not spear. But then also, the only other thing was that Saul was dead and his sons were dead. Other than that, nothing else in this story was true. Verse 10, so I stood over him and killed him because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and the bracelet that was on his arm, and had brought them here to my Lord. Therefore David took hold of his own clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan his son, for the people of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Then David said to the young man who told him, where are you from? And he answered, I am the son of an alien, or foreigner, your version may say foreigner, and Amalekite. Verse 14, so David said to him, how was it you were not afraid to put forth your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? The only thing I can think of at this point, I'm sure at this point, this guy is going, oh no.
I get caught.
I made a very grave error when I thought this was a good idea, that my story was going to get me something good. Because here, instead of David praising me and thanking me for helping him get rid of Saul, helping David get into that, into the throne, okay, instead this is not sounding very good. And sure enough,
Sounds to me like the guy wasn't in well enough to realize that David refused to raise his hand against the Lord's anointed.
Exactly. So, it's kind of like that game telephone. Start off with, say, a long line of people. You whisper something into the first person's ear. Okay? You get to the long end of the line, it started out with something, this small little thing, and by the time it gets to the other end, it is totally different. Okay? And it's very well that same sort of situation here is, he knew some of the bits and pieces that had been, spoken. He got it, 20th hand down, things had changed a little bit here and there, and didn't have certain bits, and other bits were probably false, with a little bit of truth mingled in there. And, but because of this, he decided that was a good idea. However, he is at the point now, then as soon as he hears the next order, he knows for certain, well, that was a wrong idea. Verse 15, then David called one of the young men and said, go near and execute him. And he struck him so that he died. So this man was then put to death. So David said to him, verse 16, your blood is on your own head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed. Okay, and then I will go through and I'll go ahead and go through and read it. But the verses 19 through 27 are it's a poem that David wrote, okay? He told them, in verse 18 it says, told them to teach the children of Judah. Okay, the poem is called The Song of the Bow. Starting in verse 19, the beauty of Israel is slain on your high places, how the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew nor rain upon you, nor fields of offerings, for the shield of the mighty is cast away there. The shield of Saul not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. Saul and Jonathan were beloved and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet with luxury, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan was slain in your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was wonderful, surpassing the love of women. Now let me remind you, this is not talking, okay, of any sort of homosexual love, okay? How the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war perished. Okay, this is quite the poem, and I would say it's actually a eulogy, okay, for King Saul and especially for King Saul and Jonathan. And I do have to say, for him, even with everything he went through, David went through, with Saul chasing him, Saul trying to kill him, when it came to this, he said Saul and Jonathan were beloved and pleasant in their lives. That also really shows you what David's true character was. So then, after this, okay, David's not sure what to do. So he goes to the one person that he knows has the answer. He goes to God. Chapter 2, verse 1. It happened after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, go up. And David said, where shall I go up? And he said, to Hebron. So David went up there, and his two wives also, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. And David brought up the men who were with him, every man with his household. So they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. Now, one thing, so David, obviously, you can see he moves back to the land where he should be. Okay, he is moving out of Ziklag and moving out of Philistine country. Now, one thing that it wasn't until this that I had missed throughout the years. You know, whenever you go and look, we know of when we think of the kings of Israel, we think of King Saul, then King David. Not quite. Okay, it was only the tribe of Judah that looked at it in that way. Okay, that it went immediately from King Saul to King David. Okay, however, the other 11 tribes for 2 years thought differently. Verse 8 of chapter 2. But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. And he made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, over Benjamin, and over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. Only the house of Judah followed David. Okay, so there was a 2-year period where the other 11 tribes of Israel actually followed a different king. Even though that's not necessarily really looking at David, when I came across this, I wanted to share that little tidbit. I mean, I have been hearing the accounts and the stories, however you want to put it, out of the Bible now for 35 years. Okay, I can tell you, I have read through the Bible more than once in my time, and yet somehow I missed it every single time. Okay, it must be that this is when the Holy Spirit said, "Well, Nate, you need this. You're ready to receive this. You're ready to." I don't know why, but hey, you're ready to see it. You're ready to learn it and acknowledge it. So there was a 2-year period there, but you will notice that is the line of Judah that Jesus would come from. That line of Judah, which would have been also considered the house of David. Okay, that was the one tribe that refused to look at was it Ishbosheth? Ishbosheth, yeah. How dare they even put somebody with that hard of a name in rule? Ishbosheth they refused to look at him. Why? I think it all came down to this: he was not God's anointed, and they only wanted to follow who God had anointed as king. And then one other thing, just to finish out tonight, that we are going to look at when it comes to David, is let's skip now to chapter 3 of 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel chapter 3 is when we are introduced to his 6 sons that he had. Right in let's see, in verse 2, where we begin. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon by Ahinoam the Jezreelitess. His second, Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And sixth, Ithream by David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. This is where we are going to finish off for tonight. So David is now essentially, you could say he has taken the throne, okay? Even though we know that it's at this point here, okay? Even though we know that Ishbosheth only reigned for 2 years, okay? We are still in that timeline where we're stopping tonight, okay? Ishbosheth is still, we'll call it the recognized king of the 11 tribes, but Judah is, so David has taken throne, at least for the tribe of Judah, for now, at this point. And in this time, he has had 6 sons here. I feel like there was one other thing, but I didn't put it on my notes, so I guess not. We will not, if I come across it and think of it, I'll have to share it with you next week. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for your love. We thank you so much for your grace, Lord. And most of all, I can say it for myself, Lord. I thank you so much for that great gift, Lord, that gift of salvation that you have offered. And then, Lord, that wonderful thing, Lord, that comes with salvation. Lord, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and then being able to talk with you one-on-one. Lord, I just thank you so much for all of this. And Lord, I just ask your blessing tonight on these people, Lord, and I also ask your blessing on the different Bible studies that we have throughout this week. Lord, for prayer meeting Wednesday night. Lord, I also ask your blessing for next Sunday as well, Lord, as we not just first look into your word, Lord, but also as we conduct the business of the church with our annual meeting. And Lord, I just pray that everything that we would do, especially there, Lord, would just bring you honor and glory. We ask all this in your name. Amen.